Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive veteran's mountain sanctuary is threatened by a power-hungry HOA with forged maps and fake complaints, he doesn't back down, he fights back. Armed with cameras, grit, and the law, one man takes on a suburban land grab scheme and sparks a national reckoning. The morning started like every other one up here. Quiet enough to hear the wind move through the lodgepole pines, cold enough that the first cup of coffee felt like a religious experience. I had been working on the new cedar railing for my deck, sanding each board until it looked like something a man could be proud of. 50-plus acres of mountain land around me, nothing but granite ridges, forest, and silence. My kind of sanctuary, the kind where no one bothers you unless they're a moose or bad at reading maps. Somewhere below the tree line, I heard an engine, not the deep, lazy rumble of an ATV, but the nasal buzz of a city SUV that thinks gravel roads are optional. It climbed the switchbacks in a series of impatient bursts. I stepped off the deck, wiping sawdust off my hands, and watched a glossy silver vehicle grind to a stop on my dirt clearing. The doors had a logo stenciled on the side in corporate blue, Silver Range Valley HOA. HOA, up here. That was like seeing a flamingo at a wolf sanctuary. Wrong habitat. A woman climbed out. Mid-40s, perpetual jogging outfit, posture like she was allergic to being ignored. She held a folder tight against her chest like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Morning," I said. "You're a long way from suburbia." She didn't even crack a smile. "Are you Graham Wesley?" I nodded. She shoved a stack of papers toward me. "You are in violation of community regulations. According to the Silver Range Valley Homeowners Association Charter, structures on the southwest ridge are communal recreational assets and must remain accessible to residents." I blinked once. Slow. "My cabin," I repeated, making sure I didn't imagine it, "is supposed to be a shared playground for your neighborhood." She spoke with the confidence of someone who has never been told no. "You're required to vacate on designated days so members may use the facility for rest and wellness activities. We've already blocked out several weekends in June." I looked around just in case I had missed something, like moving my entire property into their subdivision overnight. "Lady," I said, "my land is 60 acres. I bought every inch outright. I'm not part of any HOA." She tapped a page in her folder. "According to our expansion plan, this area is under our jurisdiction." "According to the state of Wyoming," I answered, "this land is mine." "Jurisdiction ends at the spot where your manicure stops." Her mouth tightened. "If you interfere, we will contact the county sheriff." I couldn't help it. I laughed. She didn't like that. Her cheeks darkened. "You are required to comply. We don't want conflict." "Then get back in your spaceship and fly home," I said, pointing at her SUV. That was when she snapped the folder closed with a slap like a courtroom gavel. "You'll regret this," she said. "We will escalate." Without another word, she stalked back to her vehicle and peeled out, spraying my boots with gravel. I watched her fishtail down the mountain road and disappear among the trees. I stood there for a moment, listening. The silence fell back around me like a blanket. Sunlight flickered across the deck. The peaks glowed white against the sky, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. But the smell of her perfume, something expensive and aggressively citrus, still lingered in the air. And that was the moment I understood. Whatever just happened wasn't a misunderstanding. Some HOA president had driven 14 miles up a mountain to hand me paperwork, claiming my cabin like it was a timeshare spa amenity. I went back inside, poured a second cup of coffee, and muttered to myself, "They picked the wrong mountain." An hour after the HOA queen retreated down the mountain, I had almost convinced myself she was just a bizarre blip in the cosmic stupidity of humanity. Maybe she'd gotten lost. Maybe she'd confused me with some wealthy dentist who let strangers borrow his lake house to score popularity points. Then I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not the same engine as before. Lower, heavier, official. A sheriff's department pickup rolled into the clearing, dust cloud behind it like a tale of accusation. 2 deputies stepped out. One was younger, all nervous energy and buzz-cut enthusiasm. The other carried the slow confidence of someone who believed his badge automatically made him right. "Morning," I said, resting my forearm casually on the porch railing, mostly to stop myself from folding my arms like a pissed-off dad. The older deputy spoke first. "We received a complaint that you're obstructing public access to a community trail system." I stared at him. "Public access? There isn't even a public road up here." His jaw tightened. Sir, multiple residents reported that you're preventing them from using this cabin, which belongs to the Silver Range Valley Homeowners Association. Ah, multiple residents, already plural, already coordinated. They aren't residents of anything up here, I said. This is private land, entirely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The younger deputy tapped something into a tablet. Do you have proof of ownership? Yes, I said. Do you have proof of oxygen in your lungs? We can trade evidence. The older one didn't appreciate the humor. We'd like to ask you to leave the property until this is sorted, to avoid conflict. Translation: let the HOA play house until we get bored figuring out who's lying. No, I said. I live here. He took half a step closer, that slow, I'm used to people complying approach. Sir, we're trying to keep this civil. So am I said. You're standing on my land, telling me to leave my own house based on a complaint filed by people who don't know the difference between private property and a Pinterest board. I walked calmly inside, grabbed a file from my safe, returned, and placed the papers on the porch railing. Property deed, survey, GPS coordinates, recorded legal description, the works. The younger deputy flipped through them, eyebrows rising higher with every line. This parcel isn't part of any subdivision, he said quietly. The older deputy ignored him. We still have to verify. Go ahead, I said, and pointed to the tall pole near the tree line. While you do that, wave to the cameras. 3 cameras, solar-powered, infrared, motion sensing. Designed to stream directly to a cloud server and a backup drive in a storage unit in town. The older deputy squinted. Why so much surveillance? Because sometimes, I said, people lie. He stepped aside and made a call. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Confidence sliding into confusion, confusion into irritation. He finally ended with a clipped understood. He turned back to me, jaw clenched. We're leaving. But this isn't over, I nodded. That seems to be a theme today. They got into the truck. The younger deputy gave me a half-shrug apology with his eyes. The older one gunned the engine like the mountain had personally insulted him. As the vehicle disappeared into the trees, I exhaled slowly. It should have felt like a victory, but something stuck in my mind. Multiple residents. Earlier, there had only been one resident, Citrus Nuclear Karen herself. Yet, in under 60 minutes, she had manifested a whole chorus of phantom complainers. Back inside the cabin, I opened the envelope she'd shoved at me. There they were, printed formal complaints, allegedly from neighbors demanding access to the communal recreation cabin. Names included Martha Sinclair, hiking enthusiast, Brady and Courtney, community members concerned about safety, J. Palmer, witness to obstruction. I looked them up on the county resident database. Martha Sinclair died 12 years ago. Brady and Courtney, no last name, no address. J. Palmer had a listed mailing address, a cemetery. I felt a slow smile creep across my face. So, they weren't just entitled, they were manufacturing witnesses. Outside my window, the pines swayed with the wind. My cameras tracked the motion automatically, small lights blinking in the shadows. All right, I muttered to the empty room. If they want to fight, they picked the wrong mountain. The next morning brought no peace. My phone buzzed just after breakfast with a notification from the county assessor's office. I wasn't expecting anything from them. Hadn't filed any paperwork, hadn't missed any deadlines. I opened the email expecting bureaucratic nonsense. Instead, I found a bright red notice of boundary review. According to the attached file, a formal request had been submitted to the county for reclassification and redrawing of parcel boundaries on the southwest ridge, specifically my land. The explanation: erroneous historic survey maps have recently come to light suggesting the area may have originally been designated as a shared-use recreational zone under HOA authority. They were actually trying to change the lines on the damn map. The request was supported by scanned documents, blurry grayscale maps that looked like they'd been pulled from a middle school art project, overlaid with markers and labels in Comic Sans. One page even had a coffee ring on it. I zoomed in. The signatures looked familiar. And then I saw it. The person who signed off on the reclassification request, Richard Callahan, deputy chair of the county zoning committee, also known as Karen's ex-husband. Apparently, divorce hadn't slowed down their mutual appetite for manufactured control. He'd used his position to validate the HOA's new evidence and sneak it into the assessor's review queue. And if I hadn't checked my emails that morning, I might have woken up one day and discovered that my entire ridgeline was officially under review for recreational reassignment. I called my attorney, Mason Dale, former military JAG, now a brutal real estate law specialist with the subtlety of a circular saw. I forwarded the documents. 10 minutes later, he called me back laughing. Did they Photoshop a topo map onto a napkin? They're calling it archival evidence, I said. He sighed. All right, here's the plan. We file a formal challenge with the assessor. Then we submit a request for an administrative injunction to freeze the review. And after that, we go to the ethics committee and nail the ex for abuse of office. While he prepared filings, I started building my own counteroffensive. I wasn't going to sit and wait while some HOA fantasy role players tried to turn my home into a goddamn day spa. I spent the next 2 hours pulling every record I had, sale contracts, GIS data, aerial photos from the day I bought the land, geological surveys, and even hunting tags tied to this parcel's designation. Mason submitted the injunction paperwork by that evening. We had enough legal firepower to delay them, maybe even get the whole thing tossed. But I wasn't done. I started digging deeper into Silver Range Valley HOA's recent land expansions. There had been a few murmurs online in the past year about shady voluntary annexations. Homeowners in neighboring counties complained about sudden changes in zoning and HOA fees being levied on properties that were supposedly outside their jurisdiction. Patterns began to emerge. Each case involved blurred or outdated survey maps suddenly resurfacing, resident complaints filed from names without real addresses, county insiders fast-tracking reviews, and every time the HOA gained a new slice of land, I started mapping these cases out. Literally. I opened up a GIS overlay tool and began logging the parcels involved. I color-coded them. I added timestamps. Then I posted the first version of the map on a basic site I threw together, Claimed Land. A few hours later, I had over 300 views. I got a DM from a guy in Colorado. Dude, they tried this exact thing on my dad's ranch. Never thought to map it like this. Subscribed. The next morning, a blogger who specialized in property rights picked it up. By noon, Claimed Land was viral in small-town Reddit communities. By evening, someone from a local NBC affiliate emailed me. Interested in talking on record about HOA expansion fraud? Not yet. Not until I had more. This wasn't just about me anymore. These bastards had been running a land grab scheme dressed up in stationery and fake neighbor complaints. Karen hadn't just picked a mountain to mess with. She'd picked a veteran with a long memory, an internet connection, and no HOA to shut him up. It had been a week since we filed the injunction, and Mason assured me that for now, the boundary review was frozen. But the silence around the cabin wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of silence that made you feel watched. When I got back from a supply run to Jackson, fuel, trail cameras, bear-proof storage bins, I noticed it immediately. My road was marked with tire tracks. Not mine. My truck had been gone for 2 days, and I'd deliberately chained off the lower gate before leaving. There were also boot prints, at least 2 pairs, leading right up to the front porch. One of the solar lights had been knocked over. I unlocked the cabin and stepped inside. The place looked almost untouched. Almost. My hunting bow was leaning against the wrong wall. One of the kitchen chairs was pulled out from the table. My rifle cabinet hadn't been opened, but the angle of the rug in front of it told me someone had stood there. A coffee cup that had been in the drying rack was now back in the cupboard, but upside down. It was subtle. Someone had been inside and tried to reset the scene, but they didn't realize they were walking through a live security grid. I powered up my backup monitor system and reviewed the footage. There they were, 2 men in matching dark jackets, HOA logos stitched on the sleeves. They came in through the rear deck, used a lockpick on the utility door. They moved with quiet purpose, snapping photos of every room, pausing to discuss, pointing at corners of the structure like they were appraising it. One of them I recognized from an HOA pamphlet Mason had pulled, Curtis Bickley, board member and owner of one of the vacation chalets 2 ridges over. The other I didn't know, but he moved like a guy who used to be military and now rents himself out to people who say things like, "We don't need paperwork, just results." I sent the footage to Mason, then directly to the county sheriff's office and to the district attorney. Mason said not to expect fast action, but the unlawful entry charge alone would force their hand. Add in tampering, and it started to smell a lot like premeditated attempted seizure of private property. But I wasn't done. I sent the same footage, cut down and annotated, to the NBC journalist who'd reached out. She called within the hour. "I just showed it to our legal team," she said. We're in. I'd like to do a story, a full breakdown of what you've uncovered. Not yet, I told her. Give me one more week. If they were inside once, they might come back. This time, I wanted to be ready. I upgraded all the cameras to motion-triggered, real-time push notifications. I bought steel bollards and installed them on the lower trail access. I mounted infrared trail cams facing the approach roads. And I published a new interactive layer on claimed land, confirmed intrusions. Each red dot showed a case of HOA board members physically trespassing on disputed land, either recorded or attested under oath. I included names, dates, satellite views, and time-stamped overlays. By morning, the site was getting thousands of hits a minute. Property owners started submitting their own footage and stories. That night, I got an encrypted message from someone claiming to be a former HOA administrator. Said they were willing to talk anonymously about internal directives sent to board members instructing them to evaluate assets before zoning proposals. My reply was simple: meet me face to face, or we don't talk. 3 days later, I met her at a gas station diner 30 miles down the valley. She looked tired, over-caffeinated, and scared. Used to run finances for HOA until, in her words, Karen turned the board into a damn land mafia. She told me Curtis Bickley had been part of an internal expansion committee that created forged historic overlays, which they used to apply for federal infrastructure grants, roads, parks, trail restoration, all on private land that they didn't own. I asked why she was talking now. "Because I saw your map," she said, "and because I found my own name on one of the forged documents." On the drive back, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting a car to tail me. Up at the cabin, I checked every bolt, every camera feed. My land wasn't just being invaded, it was being targeted by a system designed to erase the concept of private ownership through paperwork, intimidation, and quiet, careful trespassing. Karen hadn't just picked the wrong mountain, she'd picked the wrong man to play chess with. And I had just moved my queen. I figured they'd come back eventually. But I didn't expect them to bring a damn picnic. It was a Saturday, the kind of June morning that sells calendars. Bright, dry, cloudless, with just enough breeze to keep the bugs grounded. I had just finished hauling some lumber from the shed when I heard the unmistakable sound of multiple engines climbing the ridge. At first, I thought it might be tourists who'd gotten lost. But tourists don't usually roll deep in 6 vehicles, including an ATV trailer and a rented utility van with a big vinyl sticker that said, HOA Property Services, enhancing our shared spaces. I grabbed the binoculars and watched from the edge of the tree line. It was a damn parade. Leading the charge was Karen in all her smug, lycra-clad glory, wearing mirrored sunglasses and a clipboard like she was directing a corporate retreat. Behind her were 5 more adults, a few teenagers, 2 private security guys in matching tactical vests, and at least 4 kids carrying soccer balls and coolers. One of them was dragging a foldable grill. They parked just off my lower clearing, ignoring the chain barrier and the fresh, "No trespassing" private property sign posted on both sides of the trail. They moved with the entitled momentum of people who thought this was already a done deal. I started filming immediately. Wide shots, close-ups, faces, vehicles, plates. I wanted every second recorded. Karen spotted me and waved like this was a block party. "We're here for our scheduled usage," she called out like she was announcing the arrival of the shuttle bus. I stepped out onto the porch. "Scheduled by who?" "Satan." She smiled like I was the child in the conversation. According to the Silver Range Valley HOA Resolution 117B, ratified last Thursday, this property is now designated as a recreational extension zone, pending final boundary review. We're fully within our rights. I blinked. "You created a bylaw for land you don't own?" She lifted her clipboard. "We have signatures and votes." "Yeah? I've got cameras and the Wyoming Constitution." Behind her, the security detail was already helping unload folding chairs and setting up a shaded canopy like they were prepping for a damn cookout. I dialed Mason, then immediately called the county sheriff, district attorney, and finally the NBC journalist, whose name was now on speed dial. "Bring your whole crew," I told her. It's showtime. While waiting, I approached the group, just close enough to stay out of reach, but still be heard. "Everyone here is currently trespassing," I said, loud enough for the cameras to pick up clearly. "You've entered private property without consent, ignored posted warnings, and are attempting to seize land through non-legal procedural invention. This entire event is being recorded." Karen crossed her arms. You can't intimidate us with theatrics. We're here for wellness activities. I looked at the security guys. Are you licensed for enforcement in this county? They hesitated. One of them looked at Karen. The other gave me a look like we were told this would be easy. Then came the sweet sound of county cruisers climbing the trail. 2 patrol trucks and a DA investigator vehicle pulled into the clearing. One deputy stepped out and immediately waved off the group, ordering everyone to step away from the setup. The DA investigator, a sharp-eyed woman in a navy windbreaker, walked straight to me. "You Wesley?" I nodded. She handed me a folder. "We've officially opened a case. Criminal trespass. Potential conspiracy to commit unlawful seizure of land. We'll need full copies of your footage." "Already uploading to the secure drive," I said. "And I've got more." Karen's confident grin had started to unravel. "This is harassment," she snapped. "We are acting under approved HOA procedure." The DA investigator turned to her. "Ma'am, your HOA has no legal jurisdiction over this parcel. This is private land confirmed by county records. You're trespassing. And depending on what we find, this could escalate into felony territory." The kids were already being shuffled back to the cars. A teenager dropped his cooler and spilled soda cans across the grass. I watched as officers took down names, collected IDs, and logged footage. One of the security guys tried to claim he was just hired for event protection and didn't know this was private land. He was politely told he should have checked first. Later that night, I sat on the porch, laptop open, uploading the day's footage to claimed land. But this time, I added a new section: financial forensics. Because after spending the last 3 nights combing through Silver Range HOA's publicly available expense reports, required by state law, I had found something interesting. Repeated disbursements labeled community expansion research, payments to fake LLCs, a 6-figure consulting fee paid to a heritage zoning advisor who didn't seem to exist outside a Facebook profile. I uploaded it all. Annotated, documented, archived. If Karen wanted to wage war with bylaws and weaponized bureaucracy, I was going to return the favor with law, records, and a very loud megaphone. And the battle for my mountain, it had just gone federal. It didn't take long for the media to sink their teeth in. The footage of Karen's recreational invasion hit regional news the next day. Headlines like "HOA picnic turns criminal, local man fights back" started popping up all over social media. A drone shot of my cabin circled online with a voiceover calling it the front line in a battle for American property rights. I didn't ask for any of it, but I wasn't turning it down either. The day after the raid, Mason called with an edge in his voice I hadn't heard before. "We've got traction," he said. "DA's moving fast, but brace yourself. You're on the radar now." Not just locally. Meaning the Department of Housing and Urban Development just contacted the county clerk's office about Silver Range Valley HOA's grant applications. Somebody must have tipped them off. My bet. Your website. Apparently someone at HUD had seen the documents I uploaded under the Financial Forensics tab, especially the Heritage Zoning Advisor payments and the mysteriously similar formatting on multiple grant requests. The kinds of similarities that usually meant someone had copy-pasted their way into federal fraud. 2 days later, I got a knock at the cabin. Not sheriffs, not HOA, not press, feds. 2 suits, one polite and smiling, the other quiet and watching everything I did like a hawk on a diet. "Mr. Wesley," the first said, flashing a badge. "I'm Agent Miles. This is Agent Carter. We're with the Department of Justice, White Collar Crimes Division. We'd like to ask a few questions about your recent interactions with the Silver Range Valley Homeowners Association." They weren't here to intimidate. They were here because the math didn't add up. HOA expansion projects, federally funded, on parcels they didn't own, using zoning maps that seemed retroactively invented. I invited them in, gave them coffee, walked them through the whole thing, from the first encounter with Karen to the picnic raid, to the locked file cabinet I kept in the corner with labeled footage drives and printed financials. "You're running a better archive than most clerks' offices," Agent Miles said. "I used to work naval logistics," I replied. "You learn to track the weird stuff fast." Over the next hour, we built a web. Karen, Curtis Bickley, her ex-husband on the zoning committee, even the security firm that turned out to be owned by a shell company tied to another HOA board member. "They formed a structure to self-approve land grabs," Agent Carter muttered, flipping through one of the forged maps. "This is organized fraud." That word stuck with me. Organized. This wasn't just Karen getting high on her own bylaws. It was a system, a mechanism to slowly absorb unincorporated land, legitimize it with internal votes, file expansion grants to the feds, and then throw legal spaghetti at the wall until the original owner caved or sold. And if someone didn't cave, they escalated. I showed the agents the footage of the break-in. They asked for copies. I handed over hard drives. I showed them the fake complaint signed by dead residents. They asked for originals. I gave them notarized copies and metadata tags. I told them about the former HOA accountant who'd reached out. Agent Miles sat back and looked around the cabin. "Mr. Wesley, we may want you to testify. This could open a RICO investigation." That stopped me cold. RICO, as in racketeering. He nodded. If the HOA operated as a coordinated entity for illegal land acquisition and financial fraud, it qualifies. Before they left, Agent Carter paused on the porch. "Be careful," he said quietly. "This kind of exposure, people get nervous." That night, the wind howled hard through the trees, the way it does before a thunderstorm breaks. I walked the perimeter, flashlight in hand, checking every bolt and camera. I was no stranger to threats. I'd been shot at in other countries for reasons that made even less sense than this. But this time, it wasn't a war zone. It was my land, my cabin, my country, and the enemy wasn't a foreign insurgent. It was a suburban committee drunk on imaginary authority. The next morning, Karen cracked. NBC ran a segment featuring exclusively obtained footage of the HOA board discussing how to test the boundaries of unclaimed zones. Voices were altered, faces blurred, but the audio was unmistakable. One voice, Karen's, said, "If we push now, we can claim it before the zoning board catches up. It's not theft, it's just proactive." She was arrested within 24 hours. When brought in for questioning, she denied everything until she saw the forensic reports, the emails, the payment trails. Then she broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly unraveled. She blamed her ex-husband. She blamed Curtis. She claimed she was just the face, not the brain. But her name was on too many documents, her signature on too many fakes. The feds added wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted illegal land seizure to the list. And buried in the affidavit, a notation about potential psychological instability. Apparently, a court-ordered psychiatrist had already flagged Karen with compulsive control behavior and boundary-related paranoia, worsened by loss of social status and recent divorce trauma. So it wasn't just fraud, it was personal. And now it was federal. They say when it rains, it pours. Up here, when it pours, the whole damn mountain shifts. The week after Karen's arrest was a blur of subpoenas, search warrants, and breaking news segments. Silver Range Valley HOA went from a smug little cabal of lawn-measuring tyrants to the subject of a multi-agency criminal investigation. By Wednesday, their office in town had been raided by the county sheriff, with federal agents loading out file boxes like it was Christmas at the IRS. I watched most of it unfold from the comfort of my porch, hot coffee in one hand, binoculars in the other, and my dog-eared copy of the Wyoming State Constitution sitting on my lap like scripture. The media started calling it the HOA coup. I preferred the term neighborhood insurgency. By the end of that week, Karen had been formally charged with wire fraud, criminal trespass, conspiracy to seize private property, falsification of public records, and my personal favorite, federal grant fraud. Her ex-husband, Richard Callahan, was indicted for abuse of office, document tampering, and conspiracy to defraud a government entity. Curtis Bickley, the smug bastard caught on camera inside my cabin, was charged with breaking and entering, plus obstruction for destroying internal HOA communications before the raid. But the cherry on top, the security company they hired for the recreational event, turns out it was a front. No licenses, no liability coverage, and no legal right to operate in the state. Its registered address was a closed-down vape shop in Idaho. Charges: impersonating licensed personnel and conspiracy to support unlawful occupation. I got a call from Agent Miles, DOJ, 2 days before the hearing. "We'd like you to testify," he said. "Federal court. RICO basis." "I'm not a lawyer," I told him. "No," he said. "You're better. You're a pissed-off landowner with military precision and a documentary archive that would make the Smithsonian jealous." Hard to argue with that. Court was held in the federal building downtown. Tight security, packed media gallery. Karen's legal team looked like they'd rather be defending a cactus. When I took the stand, I walked the court through every damn detail. The The fake maps, the fraudulent complaints, the trespass footage, the bribed officials, the grant applications with ghost consultants, and non-existent infrastructure. I showed them claimed land. Now with over 200 verified cases of HOA boundary manipulation from 7 different counties. The judge stopped me halfway through to confirm the site's existence. "You built this yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." Remarkable. Karen sat there, hollow-eyed. Gone was the sharp-tongued tyrant who tried to picnic her way into stealing 60 acres. What remained was a woman unraveling in real time, trying to shift blame onto the men who had once propped her up, now flipping on her to save themselves. One of the most damning pieces of evidence, an audio recording I'd received anonymously and handed over to the DOJ. It captured a private HOA board meeting held in Karen's house where she said, "No one up there is going to fight us. It's wilderness. Nobody owns the wilderness. We'll just keep expanding. If we take enough, the county will catch up and legalize it retroactively. It's a numbers game." The jury listened to that quote twice. Her voice, her words, her undoing. It took less than a day for the federal grand jury to recommend full prosecution under RICO statutes. That same evening, the judge denied bail for Karen and Richard. Flight risk, public risk, risk of tampering. Curtis got house arrest with a tracking anklet and a court order banning him from HOA meetings or property management activities of any kind. The others? Conditional sentences, plea deals, forced resignations. Silver Range Valley HOA? Dissolved by emergency board vote. Turns out it's hard to collect dues when your entire board is either indicted under federal investigation or banned from public service. The headlines the next day were glorious. HOA empire falls after landowner fights back. Cabin coup, how a veteran brought down a real estate fraud ring. HOA free and federally cleared, Wesley wins. They interviewed me outside the courthouse. I kept it short. All I did was build a cabin and mind my business. They came up the wrong damn mountain. I went home that night and sat on my porch under the stars. Mason called to say congratulations. My inbox was a war zone of media offers, legal referrals, and fellow landowners asking for help. But I wasn't interested in speeches. I was interested in one last thing, a finish they'd remember. It took another 3 months for the final pieces to fall into place. The trial wrapped, sentences were handed down. Karen got 12 years, 4 for federal grant fraud, 5 for conspiracy, and 3 for criminal trespass, plus a lifetime ban from any position of authority in a housing or zoning entity. Her ex-husband, Richard, took 6 years, and the court ordered his pension from the zoning board redirected to repay a portion of the misused public funds. Curtis got 4 years probation, mandatory restitution, and a shiny new reputation as the man who couldn't find his way out of someone else's cabin. Silver Range Valley HOA didn't just dissolve, it imploded. A forensic audit revealed their finances were riddled with ghost invoices, phantom consultants, and overlapping expansion projects targeting lands they never owned. State lawmakers jumped on the momentum and pushed through the Wesley Amendment, a bill that required HOAs to publicly register all land acquisition attempts and prove title claims with independent verification before filing any zoning proposals. Funny what a little mountain standoff can do to a legislature. But none of that was why I smiled the morning I walked out of the Jackson County Records office with a manila folder and a grin. Inside was a certificate signed and sealed by unanimous vote of the Wyoming Land Trust Board, and backed by the State Department of Wildlife and the Office of Veterans Land Affairs. My 60 acres had been designated an official protected private habitat, held under a permanent conservation easement, meaning no HOA, no board, no zoning. No one could ever try this again. A week later, I hosted a small event at the cabin, invitation only. A few local landowners, a handful of vets from the Conservation Initiative, one very persistent NBC reporter, and Mason wearing a cowboy hat he absolutely did not earn. I unveiled the new hand-carved wooden sign I'd mounted to a pair of old pine beams at the trail entrance. HOA free zone. Trespassers will be prosecuted and possibly mocked. It got a laugh. We grilled elk steaks, passed around cold beers, and someone from the Wyoming Gazette handed me a framed copy of their cover story, Veteran Defends His Mountain, and wins. But later that night, once the guests had gone and the coals had died down, I sat alone on the porch under the stars. No noise, no headlights on the trail, just the sound of wind moving through trees that didn't have to answer to any board vote. I thought about everything that had happened, how close I came to losing something I'd built with my own 2 hands, how small a spark it took to ignite a wildfire of exposure. I remembered the look on Karen's face when the jury foreman read guilty on every count. It wasn't rage, it wasn't disbelief, it was confusion. She truly believed she was right, that what she wanted was more important than what anyone else owned. That process mattered more than truth. That papers with HOA letterheads could outweigh deeds sealed by the state. But mountains don't care about paperwork. They care about who shows up when it counts. In the weeks that followed, claimed land grew into something bigger. It wasn't just a map anymore. It was a movement. People from across the country submitted their stories, their documents, their own HOA horror shows. Some were small, petty fines for wind chimes. Others were huge. Land taken, homes bulldozed, lives upended. I partnered with a legal nonprofit, started publishing guides, connected landowners to lawyers, taught people how to read zoning maps, interpret surveys, fight back. And damn if that wasn't more satisfying than any revenge I could have cooked up alone. The best part? A letter arrived one crisp October morning, official seal, signed by the governor, a $250,000 state grant to help expand the site and fund legal defense for victims of HOA overreach. The accompanying letter called my case a landmark moment in restoring the balance between private ownership and community governance. I framed it, hung it next to the original property deed, the one that Karen tried to erase with a clipboard and a smile. Out here, where the wind still smells like pine and freedom, where no one tells you what color your shed can be, where fences aren't lines to argue over, but signs that someone worked hard for what's theirs, that paper means more than any HOA charter ever could. And on the gate, beneath the carved wooden sign, I added a brass plaque. It reads, "Private land, veteran-owned, trespass, and you will learn what jurisdiction truly means."